Hey everybody, it's Rob and we're back at Scorum and I got some great news today. I'm not doing the haircut. Jason is now. Jason is one of our team of scumbags and he is absolutely amazing. We got a lot of questions about why don't you ever show fades anymore. Well, I am not in the fading phase at the moment, but Jason here is an absolute master when it comes to doing skin fades. Skin fades are very popular in our shop, but I thought I can do one, but why not show you the best? So, with no further ado, Jason!
Hey! I'm Jason. We're going to be doing Skinfade is Scumbag Boogie. This is probably, if not the most popular haircut in the shop, the second most popular. I would say this haircut's popularity can be attributed to the fact that not only is it a very traditional haircut in a lot of elements, but it's also a very modern haircut in a lot of elements. It's one of the more classically inspired haircuts rather than classic haircuts we do in the shop. It has all the elements of a classic haircut when it comes to squareness. It's working away from the face, it's got a parting. But some of the more modern elements of the cut is there's actually a bit of asymmetry in the front with the side of the parting rounding up over the head. The skin fade on the sides is not very classic as well. And then we're going to be rocking it with quite a bit of volume today, as you can see. The hair naturally has a lot of lift, especially with a bit of color in it. So let's get right into it then. When I start the haircut, I always start with looking at the shape of the skull, especially for a haircut that contours to the shape of the skull as much as a Scumbag Boogie does. So before even wetting down the hair, it's important to look for the occipital bone, the parietal ridge, and the different growth patterns on the hair. So in Martin's hair, we've got an occipital bone. It's not too high in the back, it's pretty flat. This is such an important one to check, because we all know that moment when someone has like the split in the occipital bone, and you bring the fade a little too high, and you always are gonna have that dent in it. And you look for the parietal ridge here, and then this is the wide point where you'll see where the haircut, you can already see it, even before I cut the hair, goes in a little bit there and it stays low here. You check for that wide point behind the ear, that's gonna dictate the squareness, where the apex is, and then you can see the hair is naturally falling into the shape, so I'm not too worried about the crown or anything, but it is located right in there. I'm gonna go in, we're gonna wet the hair down with thorough dampness. This is really where you should already be starting to see the haircut. If you can see the haircut at this point, you should be getting excited because this is very good news. Now that the hair is thoroughly damp, I can check to see what I'm able to comb the hair into, because anything you can do with water, I'll be able to do with a bit of product. So even as I'm combing it, I can start to see that volume coming through in the front. And there is that really strong parting on the side. So then the next step of what we're going to do is we're going to section up the top from the sides. Some people like to work one side at a time and then the other. Some people like to work with the full top. Personally, I like to take the whole top into a section. But if you prefer doing it one side and then the other, it doesn't change the haircut, it's just a comfort level. So you start where the head naturally starts to round. Take your section, and you just push it up, working towards the back. Now, even if there's a parting, I always like to take the whole top up at once, because then I can very easily establish the symmetry. So this is not being taken from the natural parting, it is being taken from the round of the head. And then just the same thing on the other side. This is a great way to start with balance in the haircut immediately, because it's very easy to check, because you haven't done one side and then you do the other side and you go, oh, you know, crap, I'm a centimeter shorter on this side. I got to go back and do the whole other side again. So I like it. This is a very easy way to work through both sides simultaneously. There we go. And then, depending on the shape of the skull, you can leave the back in a few different shapes. If it's got a very low occipital bone, you might want to leave it in a point in the back, like a V shape. If it's got a higher occipital bone, rounding the back might be a little bit more natural just to follow the shape of the haircut. But that's totally a preference thing, and that's very dependent on the growth pattern as well as the shape of your customer's skull. Perfect. So now that that's all sectioned up, we're going to be starting with the baseline. When I'm doing a razor fade, I do the haircut, the baseline a little bit different than I would if I was doing a long trim or a tapered cut. As opposed to lifting it 90 degrees out of the head, away from the parting, I like to do a slightly lower baseline. What I find makes this work better for the razor fade is because you always have some dents and bumps in the skull, and if you connect the wide point, that occipital bone to the parietal ridge, you make sure to leave that length long enough that it covers the dents. It stays dark, so you can fade underneath them. So you get a very smooth fade, a very even fade with no dark spots, without compromising the haircut and having those going in and out of the haircut. You still get that smooth silhouette as well as that smooth fade. So I start at the back on the occipital bone with my clipper on the head, balanced right on that occipital bone, but keeping the comb square because I want the haircut to lay square. And I'm just setting in my first baseline. Step, and I'm pivoting the same way you would taking the baseline usually. I'm just keeping it a bit lower so I can save some of that length. So this is where you can already start to see there's a bit of a dent in the skull here. It ripples. And by following from wide point to wide point, I make sure that I'm going to be able to get this nice and even on the fade. So I'm working from the occipital bone to that wide point at the parietal ridge. Going back just to double check my work so far. Excellent. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So starting here, nice and square, step, step, step. You can already see the shape that fade is going to take on the head. This is a great way to make sure that your fades really tailor to the shape of the head and really accent the way the rest of the cut's going to lay. So now this is where a scumbag boogie gets really interesting. It's right now in the back. We have symmetry. But the thing that makes a scumbag boogie special is in the front, you actually have asymmetry along the hairline. So on the side of the parting, I'm going to go up over this widest point on the head towards the hairline. And on the other side, I'm going to stay square walking around. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to follow it up. Up, up, just like that. So that parting is now meeting the front hairline. Now to keep the cut connected on the other side, I could not do that because you could see that this would undercut in the front. So what we're doing is we're going to stay square to the haircut, the same as if you were doing any of the other haircuts on the poster. Take that away. So now you can already see the baseline of the cut. There's still a few little things in there, but I like to at this point go in and clean it up with scissors because I can take it really exact. So I'll go in with the scissors, I'll go in with a cutting comb, and I'm not going to pick the hair up. I'm just going to go from that parting with the teeth of the comb into my fingers and just take off that little edge that's created. Just going to do this working around. You really shouldn't be taking off too much hair here because you just set this in with the baseline. It's just any of the little hairs that maybe didn't fall into the comb, a little unevenness in the baseline. It's really just a cross check. And this is with very low tension. I'm just resting the hair between my fingers. If you put too much tension or you elevate too much, then you're going to get a ledge. You're going to get a little graduation between where the line you cut here and then however high you elevated it to. On this side.
Hey, Jason.
Yes.
You're doing an amazing job, man.
Thank you.
No, you are very, very good with explaining shit.
Thank you. I only speak English.
So from today on, you are going to do all the videos.
Oh, no.
So I have even more time off.
And this, just get that littlest bit of hair. Excellent. So that's the baseline. This is where I'm now going to connect this into the top. That'll be the next step, is the connection between the top and sides. So we're going to connect the top to the sides. So we're going to go from this wide point behind the ear, and we're going to follow this directly up to the apex on the head. But what's very important is when you move from one section to the next section, is that you always re-wet the hair, all the way down to the roots. Because if I was to do the rest of the haircut with this parting dried in, that parting would be present in the dry hair, it'd be present in the styling, it would completely disrupt the haircut. Especially because the scalp and the head gives off warmth, so the hair at the roots is going to dry quicker than the hair on the ends. So you have to make sure to re-wet everything so none of those partings dry back into the hair. So once everything's re-wet, you want to make sure that all those partings are worked out. You can kind of shake them out as well. If anyone's done a roller set, they're familiar with this. And now we're going to be tracing from that apex to the bone behind the ear, and the apex from the bone behind the ear. Just down and forward. This is splitting the crown area of the haircut through towards the front of the haircut. And now in the crown, there are a lot of different ways you can work depending on how the crown is laying in the haircut and the final shape you want for the haircut. So in the crown, you can leave it a bit more square if you want to go for a very classic, very strong square shape. This is also a great trick to use if the crown's very jumpy because you're saving a little bit of extra length. But especially when I'm doing a razor fade, because I don't want to leave too much weight at this baseline connection, I like to round it a little bit just to make sure that there is some graduation inside the cut. And even when doing an asymmetrical haircut, even when doing a parted haircut, I always connect the whole crown area. Because when the customer looks in the mirror, they're going to be able to see towards their ear, but not really much past that. So you want to make sure that this back of the head is as easy to style as possible. They can comb it to the left, the right, they cannot comb it at all, not put any product in it, and it will just fall balanced and even. Because you can guarantee that they'll be able to get the front a little right, but I mean, it's a total guessing game for them when it gets to the back. So now that I've got this area sectioned off, I remember where my original baseline was. So I'm going to take a section just a little bit above that, and I'm going to connect all of this hair down to that original baseline. But I'm going to not bring it all the way back down to the head. I'm going to give it a little bit of a lift, just so that that line does not get too heavy. This little bit of graduation is going to save us time when we get to the blending. You can see that little bit of lift. I look for my original baseline. I can take this hair off. I am over-directing the hair slightly as well towards the sides of the head because I want to make sure to save the length in the back so it's still nice and full over the occipital bone. This is a great fail-safe to make sure that you never compromise on the silhouette of the haircut by going too short over that occipital bone. Check for the original baseline. I cut Martin's hair about 4 weeks ago, so we're not going to be taking too much off, especially it's 35 degrees right now in the Netherlands, so especially when you are looking for razor fade models in this heat, everybody just got their haircut. I'm just connecting it all in. It's good to cross-check yourself. Just make sure to go over that line one more time, staying in front of that second knuckle. Just a nice straight line. And then we're going to take another section, just a little bit above that, and we're going to lift this one even just a little bit higher. How high you lift these sections is, again, it's dependent on how square you want the back of the haircut to lay, and it's dependent on where that crown is laying. If the crown is really strong and it's low, you want to keep these sections low. You want to keep this as heavy as possible. If the crown is a little bit higher, if it's a bit softer, then you can take a little bit more weight out of the back just because the crown is not going to be giving you so much trouble when you try and comb the hair over it. And then once you have completed this, make sure you're still you're moving with your work as well, as you want to be standing directly in front of it, because let me show you what you end up with. If you stand here and you cut this line, and then it looks straight, but when I stand here, you see immediately that it actually graduates out. So you have to make sure that to get that line even, it's directly in front of your sternum the whole time, and you're moving with your work. You're taking a step, you're combing towards you. You're taking a step, you're combing towards you. Body position is huge when you're doing haircuts because body position makes it so much easier to create squareness, and it really lets your hands do exactly the work you're looking for them to do. I mean, we all know that rule with the flat top is if you're going to cut a flat top, you have to stand square. That's true for every haircut. And now we're just going to repeat this exact same thing on the other side. I'm going to take that parting just a little bit above the baseline. We're going to lift it out of the head. We're going to look for that baseline. We're going to take some hair away. Okay, so now I've combed all the hair back, we've cut the back, and now, again, because we had a section in there, I'm gonna wet the hair a little bit and make sure that section's removed. So now we're gonna move over to the connection of the front to the side. So now this is where it's gonna be a little bit different on both sides. Because on one side, we have a high parting, and on the other side, we have an actual connection. So I'm going to pull out the parting here. It's easy to find, because Martin likes to have the parting shaved in. I'm gonna take this parting, and I'm just going to connect all of this hair to the parting. Again, the same as when I did it actually in the baseline. We're just going to loosely comb that hair between the fingers and just take a little bit away here. Baseline. Just take this, and there you go. Just check it. Perfect. So now we have the parting side. That's all connecting in. And now on the other side, let me turn it for you. We're going to be connecting the top, this front portion, to the side here. So you can already see that that parting is actually still a bit dry from the hair. So we're going to do a little bit more water. And we're going to take out, we're going to follow, we followed this hairline for the first parting, so we're actually going to follow this hairline now for the second parting, because this is really where that lift and that style of the haircut is going to come into play. Because when you comb all this down and you comb all this back, this could be a slick back, this could be a pompadour, this could be a scumbag boogie. This is where that style is going to come into play. So we're going to take all this hair out. And this section is actually tracing not only along that front hairline, but it's connecting to the apex of the head. So this section is pretty much just from these corners to the apex, takes all this out. If I was doing a symmetrical haircut, I would have done the same thing on both sides, but because of the asymmetry of the scumbag boogie, we're working a little bit differently. And now I'm going to take another parting. So I'm going to comb this back a little bit, and I'm going to see how the hair naturally tries to open up in there. And from this corner, from the corner where the two hairlines meet, so I'm not taking anything out of the top, I'm going to take another parting where the hair naturally wants to split. This is hair that's naturally going to want to fall down when I'm creating the style. So to get this to lay nicest naturally for him, I'm going to comb all of this hair, the same as on the side of the parting, in between the fingers, and just connect it. And I'm doing all of this in vertical sections, or sorry, horizontal sections. I'm not doing this in vertical sections, because I'll create a little bit of a wave in the hair where it meets that baseline, which will give it a little bit of flow back. So I'm elevating it a little bit to connect it into that elevation we put into the crown, but I'm leaving it really nice and heavy along the front hairline, so that this just gets a nice bit of flow towards the back. This next section, we're going to pull down, and this we're going to disconnect a bit. So this length here, I think is good. I don't really want to take too much off there because I can see that this is already flowing towards the back really nice. So I'm going to keep that length in the front, and I'm going to take away all of that. Let's take that away. So when it lays down, when you comb it really flat to the head, you have the disconnection. But when the hair lays in its more natural movement, you're going to get a totally blended look, but you save this length in the front now so that you can slick all of that towards the back. Now we're going to connect this front in, and we're going to take a section from about the middle of the front hairline over behind the ear a little bit. So this is where that disconnection started with the front section. So we're going to just connect it in to that little bit of disconnection. We're not looking for the baseline here, we're looking for the disconnection in the previous section. Just like that. And then another section. That's taking the whole of the front style now in. We're going to lift this up just a little bit, just to soften it. And we'll take all of this in. Perfect. Just like that. It's so important that you make sure you get those teeth on the parting when you're combing these, because even though we're not doing it with super strict, super precision, we're leaving this a little bit looser, you still have to make sure that all of that hair is in the line. Because if you leave a little bit of hair out, you're going to see that later in the cut. It's going to interfere. Get all of that over. So now we are moving from the connection of the sides to the baseline into cutting the top and connecting that into the sides. So we're going to start with a profile section now. We're going to go from just the middle of the hairline. A great way to judge the distance on this section is you really just kind of use the space in between the eyebrows for it. Just take that. We're going to take another one. This is also a very nice way of making sure that it's right in the middle. And we're going to look for that length in the crown, and we're just going to connect that in to the length on top. We've got to work with here. Take all that off. So it might look really fine on the ends here, but that's just because it's such a small section, just to create a guideline. We're just going to take another parallel section now, and we're not going to over direct all the way to it. We're going to be just a bit in the middle of the two sections, just to start to create some squareness on top. Just taking a bit off. Taking a bit more. Depending on the style you're going for, you can leave more or less length in the front as well here. You can take your section like that. You can take it just perfectly square. It totally depends on the style you're going for. It really depends too on the hair you're working with, because when you're working with very jumpy hair and you want it to slick back, you know you want to save as much length as possible. But if you're working with hair that naturally has a bit of wave to it, using that wave will create a lot of natural volume in the cut, and it'll make it really easy to style the hair. So I'm not leaving the top too long because I want to make sure that this is very easy for Martin to comb himself. Also, it's a short style, like it's completely shaven on the sides. So if we leave the top too long, it's going to be totally out of balance with the sides, and even if it is styled, it's going to clearly be completely out of control. Excellent. So now that that's cut in, we're just going to cross-check. Pulling the hair up, making sure it's even. On this side, you're going to see a bit of rounding down, just because it connects, while on the other side it stays square to save a bit of length on the side of the parting. There, lifting this up. Just trying to make sure that we're not leaving any weight in the haircut that doesn't need to be left to get it into style. See, there was a bit of length in there. There we go. Cool. So now, the top and sides are cut, and or the top and the connection are cut. We're still working on the sides. But I like to do the fade in dry hair. Because the hair in the connection and the hair in the baseline is going to move around a lot when it dries, if I fade it and then I go back into the haircut, it's going to have to redo the fade anyways. On top of this, if I dry the haircut now, the patron already has something really exciting to look at in the mirror when I start doing the fading process. And the fading process, depending on the method you use, it's probably not going to look very nice halfway through. It's going to look very half-baked. So if you start with a really nice style on top, and then the patron's very excited, and then you start doing the fading process, they're going to give you a little bit more trust, which means you can have a little bit more leeway when the haircut's looking a bit iffy in the middle because there's all these lines and stuff on the side. So now we're going to be moving into drying the hair. So I'm going to be using some of my favorite REUZEL products to dry the hair. I'm going to be going for the grooming tonic in the big professional bottle and the fiber gel. I like to use these two products together because the grooming tonic, it's got some hold, it's got some pliability, it's got a very natural finish. It gives a little bit of a natural shine, and I like that pliability. But what I like with the fiber gel when you add it in, because the fiber gel, it's got a little bit of alcohol in it, it gives the grooming tonic a bit more dryness, a drier feel, but it's also a lot stronger. So if you put a little drop of this in with your grooming tonic, you're going to get maximum control out of your blow drying. It's also going to give the hair, when you feel it in the hair's not going to feel like there's anything in it, it's just going to feel really nice and full. We'll take a bit of the fiber gel. You want to make sure, actually that was a bit too much. You don't want to use too much, because when you dry it in the hair, you want to make sure that you can still move the hair around a little bit. So a little bit of the fiber gel, and just top it off with some grooming tonic. You make sure too that you want to mix them in your hands, because if you mix them in the hair, you're going to end up with areas that are just fiber gel, areas that are just grooming tonic. But when you mix them in your hands, you're going to have that really even solution to work through the hair. Make sure especially that you're getting it all the way down to the roots. You don't want to just kind of slop it on top, because you do not need a lot of control in the ends. You want that control coming from the base of the hair. This is important for every style, but it's especially important for high volume styles. Work it through. Clean your hands off, and we're going to be moving towards the blow drying now. Excellent. So now we're going to be going into the blow dry on the haircut. I've got the grooming tonic and the fiber gel spread through the haircut. I've done the top of the haircut technically, all with precise cutting. So I know that the hair is going to fall pretty much like this on its own, which is a good style. It doesn't have the volume of the, it will with the blow dryer, but I also haven't done any texturizing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the shape of the haircut in with the blow dryer. So I'm going to be really trying to give a little bit extra volume to the front. I'm going to be making sure the sides are laying in the right direction, because I not only want to see what the hair is capable of doing on its own, but I want to see what the hair is capable of doing with a little bit of product in it. So I'm going to be going in with the hair dryer. I'm going to be using high force, medium heat, and a little bit of low force with toggling between the heats. And I'm going to be using my Denman styling brush. This is really so that I can set that strong shape in, keep that crown nice and flat, keep some lift in the front, make sure to get that parting in the right place. So I'm going to be adhering to the natural fall of the hair, but I'm going to be enhancing the shape of the cut that I put into the hair. So I'm going to be starting on the side of the parting, just making sure to work that hair over so that parting is set in. Now I'm just working through to dry the crown, and you can see where that symmetry is so important, because this is all already starting to blend on this side, the same as on the other side. So one of the most important things to be looking for in the hair as we work towards the front of the cut, trying to create volume, is you want to make sure when you get into the hair, when you look at the way those roots are naturally growing, that you grab the hair and you pull it in the opposite direction and then lift it. So now you can see that it's coming straight out of the roots. So when I pull the hair up, I'm going to be able to get the shape of the cut really standing up. So you see the hair is growing that direction. So I grab it, I click, and I lift. And I'm able to get that hair staying straight up at the roots. And that's going to really create the most volume. Really going to help that hair pop up. See? Grab it. Because you want that straight lift. And this is not only just important when you're creating a lot of cut in like a scumbag boogie or a pompadour, but this is so important when you start drying like a flat top or a psycho. Trying to get all of that hair up, is you have to be watching for that volume. Excellent. So now that we've got the hair dried, we're able to see a little bit more of what the haircut's going to look like once we've both done that fade on the sides and we've blended the top end. We're also now really able to work with our texturizing to make sure that the texture in the haircut enhances the color rather than detracts from it. Because, and this is very common when you're working with colored hair and you cut your straight lines, is you get chunks where there's the difference between the natural hair and the colored hair. So we have to make sure when we blend the haircut, we're not only blending the actual length, but we're trying to enhance and work with the color of the hair. This is, I mean, super important in the summer where people get so many natural highlights through the top. This is also really important when you're working with people doing fashion colors in their hair. Is how do you fade, you know, dark growth on the sides with a bright pink top? A lot of that is how you texturize the hair to make sure that everything blends. So now, as you're probably wondering, we're going to be starting the fade, as we're finally doing the razor fade. So we've got our baseline here, and I know that this length I want to keep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave about a comb's length below that baseline is where I'm going to set my zero line in the haircut. So I've got my baseline here. So if that's where it is, I'm going to go in. I'm going to start with pretty much a comb of distance. This will leave me more than enough space to make sure that I can get a smooth transition between the fade and the length and the parting. So we're just going to set a smooth bald line there. The great thing with the comb's distance too is it's a little bit too much distance, is you're going to end up with a really soft fade. And having a little bit of darkness in the fade actually creates a bit of geometry in the haircut because you have the silhouette of the hair following the profile on top, but you're also going to have a silhouette of the haircut on the side. So if your fade is just totally soft and light through, you're going to have no geometry. You're just going to have the shape on top. But this, not only does it give me, in my opinion, a bit of an old school feeling, but you also get this second silhouette where you can play with the length, how this interacts with the length on top. So this is really about how you build a haircut to include a fade rather than have a fade and then a haircut. And the reason I'm not punching the line in like this is I like that already I'm starting to fade the line. Even as I'm approaching it, I'm not setting in a hard line, but I'm still setting in a bit of a softer guideline. This is where using your mirror is such an important trick as well, is you want to make sure that not only does it look balanced from your eye, but when you look in the mirror, too far, it looks balanced.